Hello, James. Thank you for agreeing to this interview. Would you like to do a short introduction about yourself?
Of course. Hi, Eleanor. Thanks for asking me to come and talk. So my name is James Lee. I'm a consultant that lives just outside of London. I consult for a range of grant funding organisations. I do some private sector gigs. I volunteer on a couple of advisory bodies in the public sector. I was born and raised in London. Both my parents are immigrants that came over from a place called Singapore, which is in Southeast Asia. They came to the UK in the 70s. Both my parents are also disabled. They are visually impaired. They actually met at a school for the blind in Singapore, which I know this is a section about me, but I felt it important to mention my parents because as a disabled person of colour, I'm hugely influenced by my parents, who are also both disabled people of colour.
What does Disability History Month mean to you, if anything?
Well, up until very recently, I hadn't actually heard of Disability History Month, which I think says a lot. I think that there is a huge value in having days, weeks, or even months of significance on which to rally allies, on which to gather support, on which to push things forward. But I also think that it's a shame that we need these days, weeks, or months to be marked out as special, as for us. I hate that term. I think that it should be something that lives with us as disabled people, and something that lives with people who are non-disabled every day of the week, every week of the month, every month of the year. It's not something that is amplified or subtracted. Sorry, my maths is not my strong point. It's not something that is either amplified or reduced by having a special month or certain day assigned to it. I think that these are themes, the themes that we explore in Disability History Month are themes that we should explore every day of our lives. I see the power and the value of having something significant like this, as I said, but I do think it's a shame at the same time that we also need something like that.
And how has disability impacted you as a person of colour? Or the identity of being a person of colour impacted on you as a disabled person?
That's a really good question. It's one that very few people ever even think to ask. I firmly believe that we are not defined by any single characteristic. I think it's easy for us, when we are talking about disadvantage, it is very easy for us to want to box people in to certain identifiable labels, because that makes it easy in our brains. It's human nature. We want to think about it. It's easy for us to compartmentalize if we label things, and it's easy for us to act on things or feel like we're acting on things if we have those compartments. But we are multifaceted individuals. Your identity isn't defined by disability or being a person of color or sexuality or religion or social class or what have you. It's a combination of these things. But I do believe that intersectional disadvantage and intersectional advantage both exist. They are both real things. I find it fascinating that we think to address one thing, such as disability, not necessarily having an impact on other things, such as being a person of colour. I'm conscious that it's a bit rambly. I'm just trying to think of a good example that I can give you around disability and being a person of colour. There's a great book called How to Reach Everyone All the Time. I can't remember the name of the author, but it talks about how there was a black woman in America who tried to get a job working at the reception of a car factory. I think it was. I may be getting this horribly wrong, but it's something along those lines. And she was denied the role. And when she challenged this, based on the grounds of racism, they said to her, no, it's not about race. We employ lots of black people, but then she pointed out all the black people you employ are men who work on the shop floor. All the receptionists you employ are white women. And it's that idea of kind of, they saw they saw race as kind of the defining factor when it was actually also her gender playing a role in it too. There are multiple layers of advantage and disadvantage. And I think just being a disabled person of color exposes you to so much more of that.
Thank you. Can I ask you, just from the top of my head, a question?
Yeah.
About the COVID-19 pandemic, and it specifically made discrimination and violent attacks specifically on people of East Asian origins or Southeast Asian origins. Did it affect you at all, or do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have lots of thoughts. I don't know what your audience is for this, because I don't know how many of them are appropriate for children.
It's not built for children.
Okay. I think that clearly there was a demonstrable rise in racism and in hate crime incidents against people who were of a Southeast Asian heritage or appear to have a Southeast Asian heritage. And that all started with, I think, some of the unhelpful rhetoric around the world about how we talk about the virus, about where people deemed case zero to be, as it were, where people felt the origins of the virus came from. A lot of that was driven by some of the unhelpful rhetoric around that, some of the, well, let's call it what it was, frankly racist rhetoric, calling it things like the China virus and so forth. I think that is obviously something that was hugely, well, it's horrendous that happens. I think that if you are a disabled person of Southeast Asian heritage, you feel, and you have the danger of feeling an even more acute vulnerability to that. And I hate the word vulnerable. I hate to use it. I know we use it so much when we talk about disabled people in the context of COVID, but I'm talking about vulnerability in the context of hate crime here. We know that hate crimes against disabled people are hugely underreported, that they are rarely followed up, that they rarely end in any form of judiciary action. To be both disabled and a person of Southeast Asian heritage, I think puts you at an even greater, it leaves you feeling so much more exposed, so much more targeted and singled out. And it may well be that the people all around me, that the thought had never crossed their mind to say anything that was racist or to say anything that was ableist. But there is a level in which we talk about internalized ableism, we talk about internalized racism, and there is a level to which that you can't help but have that creep into your psyche a little bit, where to the extent where I would go to the shops and I think, right, are people looking at me more so? I've got what I like to think is a relatively thick skin. I've been a wheelchair user for a very long time. I don't bat an eyelid at the occasional lingering glance or the occasional, I almost said longing stare there. the occasional lingering glance, or like if someone looks at you and you know that they're thinking something, or you project that they're thinking something slightly unkind, as many people many disabled people may do. But I think that combination of factors, the prevailing mood of racism at a time when there was also this huge issue with disability hate crime is just it's not a pleasant combination.
Thank you, James.